Alright folks, welcome back. So in the last video we were going through how Wallace has gone to the Lennox and he has gathered a small band of followers, mostly Highlanders or Irishmen, and one of the leaders is Stephen of Ireland, the famous character from Braveheart, Crazy Stephen, it's my island and all this sort of thing. And Wallace has decided to gather intelligence at St Johnstoun, which is the capital of Scotland at the time, Perth nowadays. And he's decided to put his violent streak to one side in order to gather intelligence and information about English strength in the area. And the English in St Johnstoun seem to be a lot more competent than the ones at Ayr, because they're actually checking on who's coming into their town, which should be common practice anyway, regardless of, even under normal circumstances, this is what they should be doing. But the mayor interrogates Wallace, who claims to be Will Malcolmson from Ettrick Forest, and he just lies his way in basically and charms the guy, and they get let in. And so they spend a few days drinking with the English, getting them drunk, getting them to talk basically. And that's where we're basically at right now. And Wallace has found a lover in St Johnstoun, so he's getting a little bit of distraction, I guess you could say. So we'll pick up the story from there. At last the men brought him news that Butler, the captain, would pass from St Johnstoun back to the castle at Kincleven. This cheered Wallace. Immediately he and his men left the town. They hurried to the Methven wood. Wallace put his horn to his lips and gave loud blasts. The men who had waited for him in the forest heard his signal and ran to meet their leader. Right happy was Wallace when he saw his men so excited to see him. They fired many questions at him, which Wallace answered patiently. He then commanded them to get ready to move. They passed out of the wood in good order, going in the direction of Kincleven Castle, until they entered a glen beside the River Tay, where they lay in ambush, hidden among the dense trees. Wallace sent scouts forward to spy the area. By 1 hour past noon, 3 forward riders went by. The lookout reported to Wallace and awaited his command. He told them to remain hidden. When we chuck our spears, Butler will know soon enough of our presence here. Take heed. Do not act until I give the order. Wallace had few men, but their discipline made them feel sure they would win this adventure. Just then the English troops came in sight, numbering 90 well-armed men, all likely men of war. Wallace was pleased that their number was no more. He thanked God, then took to the field. The Englishmen wondered whom these men could be who were running toward them. They suddenly realized that they were under attack as the runners launched spears in their direction. The enraged cavalry spurred their horses forward in an attempt to ride down the attackers. Wallace and his men did not flinch or break their momentum. At the first rush, bold Englishmen were slain. Wallace struck one with his spear, penetrating the rider's chest, the shaft emerging out through his back. The spear shaft broke as the rider fell to the ground. With his sword unsheathed, Wallace ran throughout the whole enemy, dealing deadly blows all around. The others speared horses, bringing riders to the ground, which is cruel but pretty smart. Those unhorsed were quickly defeated. Butler dismounted in order to defend himself, as did some others of his household, who held high reputations for their skills in war. Fierce hand-to-hand fighting commenced. He stood his ground, although he had been shaken. A number of Scots fell beneath the blows of Butler and the other strong warriors of his side. This did not escape the attention of Wallace, who then made his way towards the English leader. Wallace reached his quarry and rained down a heavy blow on his helmet. The blade sliced through, embedded in Butler's skull, and caused the watery remains of his brain to issue out through the vision of his helmet. Sounds pretty horrible, doesn't it? Thus Wallace delivered his men from their fear of Butler. The bloody encounter continued, with Stephen of Ireland making telling blows. Curly did likewise with his good staff of steel. When Butler's men saw that their leader had been killed, they began to flee the field. They realised defeat was beckoning, and so they ran towards the castle for safety. Like I said, like one leader makes a big difference. Once that talisman goes down, whether it's a flag or a leader or a standard or a captain, the whole thing is just, it's gone. It's gone. War is, what war is really all about? War is all about momentum. It's not about numbers or technology. Well, those things help. But what it's truly about, this is what I've learned reading this book, what it's truly about is keeping and sustaining and creating momentum and psychology. It all comes down to what's in here, not what's in here. And that's what we get in Braveheart. Learn to use this, and then I'll teach you to use this. Totally right. Okay. The Scots followed fast. Only a few men had been left to defend the castle. Atop the wall, women and priests wept when they realised their men were being pursued. Those inside let down the bridge and raised the yett to allow entry to those in retreat. The wearied Englishmen entered, but Wallace followed hard on their heels and gained entry to the castle. That's going down now, no doubt about it. Butler's wife, some women, 2 priests, and some young children were taken from the scene of slaughter and locked in a room. Yeah, who wants to see that shit? Get them out of the way. To prevent the chance that Englishmen should lay siege on the castle, Wallace took up the bridge and quickly closed the yett. He ordered the men to remove the dead bodies, but those in the castle and both those in the castle and those on the outside. Later, he led his men in the burial of 5 of his own that had fallen. So we see that the Scots are not invincible. Well, and the Irish as well, of course. They do take losses. But it's their iron discipline that allows them to beat the odds every time. But I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Did the people in the castle do the right thing by opening the doors so that the English could come in, or should they have kept the doors shut? Because the whole point of a castle or any sort of fortification is to keep enemies out. So should they have let them in or just let them stay outside and die? It's a hard choice either way. But it is emphasized by Henry the Minstrel that no one can outrun Wallace. His muscles are just too big. He's too fast. He's a big guy, but he's really fast. So as soon as they opened the gates, that was it. Because that's, like I said, that's the whole point of a castle. Keep the door closed. Wallace and his men remained in the castle for the next 7 days. Each night they busily gathered the castle spoils, transporting to Shortwood Shaw good wine, food, and household gear, among which was gold and silver. When Wallace judged the time was right, the women, priests, and children were released and told they were free to go on their way. Which is kind of a mistake in my opinion, because they're obviously going to go to St Johnstoun and tell them what's happened. Having taken all that was of any use, he struck down the gate and set fire to the rest. They ripped out the iron bars and stanchions from the windows and threw all the heavy ironwork into the moat. Then they broke down masonry, and all wooden doors and lock bars were burned. Hastily they made their way to Shortwood Shaw, where they chose a place of strength, camping in the forest and remaining there trouble-free for a while. News of Kincleven had still not reached St Johnstoun. And it's been like a week? A whole week has passed and no one knows this has happened? I was just praising the competence of the garrison at St Johnstoun, but maybe we need to call that one into question. How long were they supposed to be away for? Anyway, the word hasn't gotten there yet. When it was daylight, the country folk saw a great plume of smoke rise high into the sky and ran towards Kincleven to see what was amiss. They found the castle destroyed and in ruins, for obvious reasons, so that the English can't use it anymore. Sir James Butler's widow reached St Johnstoun and told Sir Gerard Heron what had happened. Her son, Sir John Butler, was also present as she described the events. They judged that it was the work of Wallace and that he must have spent some time watching their movements. Correct. They have correctly deduced exactly what happened. Heron ordered his force to arms to hunt him down. Riding forth from St Johnstoun clad in shining armour, 1,000 mounted soldiers set out in fury to seek out Wallace and his men. See, letting those civilians go anywhere they wanted, that was a big mistake. No, I'm not saying that Wallace should have killed him or anything like that, and he wouldn't have done that, but like they shouldn't have just let them go like that, because they're obviously going to go to St Johnstoun and tell, Gerard Heron and the younger Butler exactly what went down, and I don't blame the English here for their response because they've just lost a great captain, to the Scots, and one of their castles has been burned down and taken. So this is how, what am I trying to say? This is exactly the response that you should expect, And so I don't hold it against the English for responding the way that they did. I probably would respond the same way. They encircled Shortwood. So this is 1,000 men are going out looking for Wallace now. They encircled Shortwood Shaw, dividing their force into 6 groups. The largest force of the 6 would begin the assault, while the others remained stationary around the perimeter. See, this is pretty smart tactics here on the part of the English, So Butler and Heron, they're pretty smart, They realised not just to rush in, divide into 6 groups and circle round the woods so that they can't get out. It's like creating a net. Wallace ordered his men to withdraw to the strength they had first chosen when they had originally arrived in the Shortwood. He told them to defend his position at all costs, for they could expect to be attacked from every side. Sir John Butler led 200 men into the forest. He was sorely aggrieved and intent on slaying Wallace to avenge his father's death. Can't blame him. I can't blame him. He's in the same position that Wallace himself was in at Loudon Hill. Wallace and the men had chosen to defend themselves atop a precipice, where they could build defences and using crossed boughs and saplings. Pretty smart, Wallace is a good strategist. He really is. From one side, they could issue out onto a plain and retreat if need arose back into their strength. In Wallace's company, there were 20 good archers against 140 English bowmen. On the right-hand side of the enemy bowmen, 80 spearmen were positioned to aid them should the Scots issue forth. Sir John Butler's group launched the first assault. Wallace held a bow which was of larger proportions than normal. His quiver held arrows that were both long and sharp. There was no man in Wallace's band strong enough to draw the string of that bow. Kind of reminds me of the Greek Odyssey, Odysseus is the only one who can pull the bowstring, sort of thing. Only he was capable of firing an arrow from it. Boldly he shot among the English soldiers. He drew back an angled arrowhead to the hooks and let fly, the arrow slaying the foremost assailant. The English archers replied, raining a hail of shafts down upon the Scots. The onslaught was hard to bear. Wallace's men sustained many wounds. He had too few good archers in his company that day. When he saw how his men were being harmed, he judged it would be better to meet the English in a more even contest, using sword and spear. He commanded them not to stand in defence, but to take the fight to the enemy. Well, that's pretty much all he can do, otherwise they're just going to get shot, He thought of all ways to save his men from death, and put his own life at great peril, as he sought to turn the tide of battle by attacking their opponents. Many English archers met their end from Wallace's skill with the bow. And, we're always told about the skill of the English archery, but, Wallace was, that was his personal seal, was the archer. He's well known for that. The English bowmen were Lancashire men, one of whom waited patiently to let fly an arrow at an opening where Wallace often appeared whenever he fired his arrows. the English archer let fly. His arrow pierced the steel collar worn by Wallace and wounded him sorely on the left side of his neck. Wallace was astonished, but not greatly aghast. Out from his men he raced forward and slew the archer. Many more of them fell under Wallace. He killed 15 that day with his bow, until his arrows were exhausted. The English archers were well supplied with shafts. More soldiers arrived from the outside to attack them on both sides. The knight William of Lorraine, nephew to the dead Butler, arrived from Gowrie with a company of soldiers to avenge his uncle's death. Lorraine's 300 armoured men ran forward, the knight himself leading the way. See, this is a lot of competence from the English. Their tactics, their strategy, the way they're conducting the battle is all ticks. It's all good. Well, not good for the Scots, obviously, but what I'm saying is like the way that they're fighting this battle, planning, using their heads, strategizing. This is a very formidable opponent for Wallace to try and overcome. He's really put them in danger this time, his men, I mean. Wallace offered God a prayer of contrition for his sins, then heroically called to his men. So, Wallace realized this might be it. He knows that he might not be walking out of these woods alive, for all he knows. He's already taken a wound, the arrow penetrated his armour. It's a good thing he was wearing armour. He might be dead right now, but, You see, good sirs, their intent. There is no other course but to do or die. We are in the right. The happier it will be if we should escape by God's grace from these parts. Lorraine and his men had taken up a position near at hand. It was after noon, and when the English held a council to decide their next move. See, they're not just running in like idiots, they're actually strategizing and planning, Reviewing the situation, they judged that as the wood was neither long nor wide, Wallace could not hold out for much longer. 500 eager Englishmen made their way on foot into the forest. Sir Gerard Heron remained on the outside edge. Sir John Butler had chosen the side from which he wished to attack, and Lorraine, with a strong body of men, chose another. Wallace and his men found their situation becoming even more perilous. With only 50 men, the defenders absorbed the assault of the combined English forces. They found themselves attacked on all sides with both sword and spear. Wallace, in anger, drew his sword to defend his men. There were few eager to stand before him. He passed through the thickest of the press, hewing down the foe at great speed. Armour gave no protection against his telling blows. Whomever he struck died without fail. Even the fiercest succumbed quickly. The Scots, to hold their position, pushed back the enemy with all their might. Sir John Butler bolstered the assault and inflicted heavy wounds on the Scots. Lorraine also increased the attack until the Scots could no longer hold their position. They fell back into the thickest part of the wood, yet they still managed to kill many English. Wallace and the men fled to a new strength while continuing to inflict heavy loss on the foe. They could only help themselves, none would come to their rescue even. The English force had been divided, but they soon drew together and carefully planned a new strategy. They ranged their force, maintaining their encirclement, but held their attack, biding their time. The Scots were hurt and part of them slain. They could not make such a good defence again if the enemy attacked too soon. They waited, gaining some much needed rest, still waiting warily for a renewed assault. Wallace, seeing the English so nearby, took the initiative. He unsheathed his sword and attacked Butler. A heavy bough of a tree came between Wallace's sword and Butler's head, and saved the knight a fatal blow. And saved the knight from a fatal blow, that should be. Wallace's sword sheared the branch, and the broken limb tumbled on top of Butler. Both bough and Butler crashed to the ground. The whole enemy force present in that position came upon Wallace fast and rescued Butler. Lorraine was anxious and sprinted towards Wallace. Wallace turned to meet him. Lorraine gained no protection from his armour. The point of Wallace's sword pierced Lorraine's protection, and he was left dead upon the forest floor. The Scots came to their leader's side and fought nobly until he was brought to safety. Wallace gained the strength despite the will of his foes. His bold action had delivered an advantage. The cry went up that Lorraine was dead. Sir Gerard Heron marched into the wood, and the entire host assembled to him. At the north side, Wallace and his men issued out and made their escape, thanking God that they were parted from that place. They made their way to the Cargill wood that night. 7 of his men had been killed, but the English loss was nearly 60. So that would be, what, 60 would be, like, what, 120 men? Something like that. I'm not good at mathematics. The English force especially mourned the loss of Lorraine. They again sought an encounter with Wallace, but when they found he had escaped, they made a great deal of moaning. They searched the wood for Butler's gold, but found none. They did find Butler's horse, but nothing else. In great disappointment, they returned to St Johnstoun. So at least in this instance, they had a real proper go at the Scots, but you see how the English are, kind of reluctant to go into the woods when Wallace is there. Because previously it was talking about how the men from Ayr didn't want to pursue Wallace's men into the woods, and here you can see why. Because Wallace and his fighters are excellent woodland fighters. They know how to use the forest and the woods to their advantage, whereas the English seem not to be able to the same extent. But, the English did it all right here. I mean, they didn't make any mistakes. They didn't rush in. They weren't foolish. They weren't rash. They weren't stupid. They gathered reinforcements. They planned what they were going to do. And against a lesser commander than Wallace, they probably would have won. The casualties seem to be a bit lopsided, however. The fact that the Scots lose so few and the English so many. But then again, fighting in the woods is a unique style of warfare, and the Scots are better at it, quite frankly. And you have to be thinking as well that apart from exceptions like the captains and the commanders and all this, like Lorraine and Heron and Butler, the average English soldier, probably not many of them are veterans. They might just be teenagers or conscripts or former prisoners or mercenaries. One man who's motivated and a veteran with experience is, going to fight a lot better than somebody who's been press ganged into the army 3 weeks ago. So you do have to kind of bear that in the back of your mind when you read these things. But pretty interesting. Again, Wallace kind of making a foolish mistake and letting the women and children and priests just go wherever they wanted. He should have escorted them somewhere, in my opinion, taken them to the nearest port and put them on a ship and said, go back to England. Well, that's what I would have done. But hindsight's 20/20, isn't it? I mean, it's very easy to sit here and play armchair general. I wasn't there. So besides, you either have to let them go or kill them. That's pretty much your only two choices. And he's not going to kill them because, Wallace is a staunch Catholic. He would never harm the innocent. That's part of his upbringing and his belief system, And that's a commendable thing too. But, Wallace, he's not quite out of the woods yet, if you'll pardon the pun. There is more still to come. But be sure to leave your thoughts and comments below, and thanks for watching.